We'll get rolling along here. So our topic for the next 6 weeks is adversity, accepting adversity. I thought I'd just run down the little syllabus here for this topic, which I'm sure we can completely pin down and nail and thoroughly understand adversity in all of its forms of, why is there suffering in the world, things like that. Very, very simple topics that I'm sure we will get to the bottom of in 6 weeks. Which on that note, I'd like to thank Waylon, who I don't see. He dodged this night, maybe on purpose, for the topic. And also I'm going to thank the teachers who I'm on for the first 2 weeks. So for the next 4, the ones that got to clean up and answer all the questions that I'm going to ask and not answer. I think you're on that list, aren't you, Rick? Yeah, Rick and Richard and those. But tonight is accepting adversity. It's kind of an introduction, kind of talking through what a faithful response looks like. And so starting out, when we say adversity, what could we mean? What comes to mind if I say adversity? Hardship, struggle. Okay? Anything specific? Because you have different kinds of adversity, right? You could have the external kind. That's the one I naturally thought a lot about, was things that come kind of at you from the outside. But there's internal adversity. There's really all different kinds. Yeah, kind of depending on what part of your life you're in too, that changes, doesn't it? I'm guessing if you have any years on you, you had some types of adversity that were more common when you were younger. Certainly we go from teens to 20s to 30s, early parents to older parents, and as you get older, you have different kinds of adversity, right? Some of you might be in adversity right now. How many of you can think of a time where you thought, man, I really didn't know what adversity was until this point in my life? Anybody have any times like that? Yeah? Anybody want to share one? Joanne, go ahead.
We had a flood back in 1989 where we were living. It was only 4 feet of water, but it really messed up a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And
Only 4 feet.
Do it.
Only 4 feet of water.
So I was in charge of the women's ministry at the time, and we were talking about this subject, and I didn't really have a lot of volunteers to talk. So I decided, well, I mean, I had a minor thing happen, but I'll share it.
Yeah.
So I did. And it was funny, the reactions I was getting. Oh my goodness, that's horrible. And I thought, oh, it really wasn't that bad.
See, it wasn't, yeah.
Well, it was at the moment, but after a while, you kind of accept it and go on.
Yeah.
But my mother told me, she said, we walked into to where we were living, and it looked horrible because we had horses, and we had the flood brought everything up from the pasture into our house. And so we opened the door, and my husband and I were standing there, and she said, you got 5 minutes to cry, and then roll up your sleeves, and we're going to get busy because nobody's going to do this for us. They went, okay.
Okay, now who was that?
So I saluted her,
And that was who? Who was that said that?
So the one,
Who said that to you?
my mother.
Your mom, okay.
My mom.
So you have 5 minutes to cry and then roll up your sleeves and we're getting to work. Kind of pushing right through.
The next adversity that I had, we'll fast forward to 2004, and that's when Ron was diagnosed.
Yeah.
I had a few others, but that was
That'd be a big one.
the worst.
Yeah. And that's kind of the trick here. Some things hit us and they're difficult and they're frustrating and they're stressful, but they pass pretty easily.
But the thing is, God doesn't do it, but we have adversities, a little one, a bigger one, maybe a little bigger one.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's a teaching point for us so that we can survive life.
Yeah, we grow through them. And God does build us up. And I'm going to try my best to kind of not step on the other topics coming up, because, again, we got 5 more weeks of this. But definitely, you have some that are bad, and you thought that was bad, and then another bigger one comes. And God strengthens us and prepares us and gets us ready for other ones. But some of those are deep-seated. Some are surface level. Some are, flood in my book would be pretty bad. We've been through some kind of physical adversity, but Ron getting sick would be on a different level, and those are deeper seated, and some of those come by accident or naturally. Some adversity comes from other people and their exercise of choice and free will, and all that stuff is things we'll talk about going forward. But I kind of wanted to just focus in on the intro. Is we're kind of talking about parts of our experience in our heart that may be scarred, that may be walled off. We may have had some difficult things, and talking about that stuff can be hard. It can be emotionally draining. It can be difficult, and we have to be careful not to treat those things too lightly. As we talk about them here, we'll do our best not to do that, not be overly academic about it. But in this series, I think our plan is to include all the usual suspects of adversity, all the difficult questions that we might get, kind of the borderline impossible things to answer that people might ask us, that accepting adversity might entail. As mentioned, things like, why is there suffering in the world? That's the big one that people ask. Why is it that some people struggle so much while others live lives of abundance and physical blessing? What other questions do people have about suffering in the world, suffering and faith and God? What do you hear? What do people want to know?
How could there be evil in the world? But from an atheist standpoint, how could there be evil? Let's just say from a Jew's standpoint, how could 6 million Jews be murdered in the Holocaust if there was a God? Or how could Jesus be Messiah? It might be something that you might say.
Yeah.
Well, how would we respond? How would we be prepared to defend our faith?
Yeah, Rick said people ask and question the existence of evil in the world. You have a good God who's in control and who's powerful to make changes, to do what he wants. Why evil in the world? And Rick brought up the Holocaust. How could 6 million Jews perish in the Holocaust? Why would God allow that? How could God allow that? And you start getting questions like that. What other questions do people ask about suffering or pain or trial, adversity? Some are general like that, right?
You get a lot of why is this happening?
Yeah, a lot of specific, individual, unique to me. Why is this happening to me? Which I think the general ones might be a little bit easier to answer. Why is there general suffering in the world? I think maybe we could give that a little bit more reasonable of an answer, but as you get more specific and focused in, it's kind of like, okay, God, I understand evil in the world, but why evil in my world? Why my spouse? Why my child? My wife and I have 3 kids, all came out healthy. I did nothing to deserve that. This week, one of our friends had the 12th or 13th anniversary of their baby being born who lived 5 days. Why? Why does God answer one prayer but not the other? And we have these questions that come up. Why is it important that we are able to talk about this? Why do we need answers to this? This is the good part for Waylon. I mean, it's a tough topic, but it's an important topic. Why do we need to know how to talk about suffering and pain? Okay. Mary said, read the book of Job, and we will some tonight.
Well, ignoring their need for an answer makes us seem uncaring.
Yeah. Ignoring their need for an answer makes us seem
Now, if
uncaring.
we're uncomfortable enough with the question, then we don't want to answer that either.
Yeah, and if we don't answer it or we don't communicate that we care, how does that reflect God's love towards them?
Well, it also shows us how to help other people with adversity.
Yeah.
So, like, if you go through something and you see how God brought you out of it, he can use you so mightily to help somebody else that really needs it at that point.
Yeah.
So he sets up stuff that we don't know about, but we have to, when it happens, we have to still trust him.
Has that ever happened to you that you start going through an adversity and somebody comes up to you and says, I've been there? And what kind of peace that is to know that somebody else has been through it and got through it? But God does. He brings us through things. He equips us in that to help others.
And that's important. That's important for us to recognize and open up and help other people.
Yeah. Yeah, there's kind of an others focus to that. Other people need an answer, especially those people who don't have faith that we have. I mean, we have faith in God who controls all things, who can do what he wants, who sees the whole timeline, and we still struggle sometimes with this. What about the people who don't have that faith, who don't have that trust in a God who can hold them secure in his hand? They need answers, and who are they going to turn to if we don't have something to say, have some kind of presence? I listen to podcasts sometimes. One of the ones I listen to right now, it's called Diary of a CEO. It's kind of interesting. I got Rachel hooked on it. It's this guy in London who just interviews interesting people. And the last podcast I started, I'm 20 minutes in, and he took a Christian, an atheist, and a spiritual guru and put them down at the table next to each other. Because in England, they're seeing a bit of a resurgence back towards Christian faith. And so this guy wanted to experiment. And the first and only point of contention so far that the atheist has brought up is, if God is good and God is in control, why is there suffering in the world? And that's kind of all he has to hang his hat on. And if somebody doesn't get an answer from faithful people, they're going to go talk to that guy who says, oh yeah, God can't be good because of this. We have a responsibility to other people to at least have some kind of answer. And I think a biblical answer, not just an emotional answer. And that one that doesn't discount emotions, because emotions, it's a huge part of what we suffer and go through. It's a huge part of trial. Sometimes it's just enough to be there and not trying to explain. But people who want to know how a loving God can allow for suffering in the world, the church needs an answer. And I think we probably need an answer for us too. Because as we've pointed out, we're going to go through that stuff. Trial hits everybody at some point. Chris?
Well, for me, adversity means it's a faith development. Because whenever adversity hits you, regardless of what level it is, if you remain true to God, it builds your faith. Just like with Daniel, we saw the things that he went through up to the point of death with the lion's den. And each time he grew and grew and grew. And if we, of course, people that don't have faith, I think that's something that we should maybe talk to them about or help them to understand. Or get them to at least acknowledge that there's a God and Christ. But if you're faithful and you're hit with this, to me the thing is you're being tested and you're being developed and you're being matured for something else, whether it's helping someone or teaching or whatever it will be. You know, that's the purpose of it. How we respond to it depends upon how deep we are and how much we have researched it and thought about it.
Yeah. And I think that's the faithful, healthy response. But in trial, anytime we go through trial, some bigger than others, there are some, and even talking about trials and struggles and suffering in the world, and there's a risk here that sometimes people don't want to talk about it because they don't feel like they can without leaving themselves vulnerable. I mean, there is a risk when you approach this topic. Why does God allow some things to happen? Why is there pain? Why is there suffering in a good world? Even our own faith, there's an inherent risk too. When you talk about this from a worldly perspective, a perspective of self. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, is getting the right perspective as we go through suffering, as we kind of help other people go through suffering. I started thinking about, there's a lot of things we do, we avoid if we can't handle those. Anybody have anything they avoid because you just can't deal with it? Dr. Pepper? Till 2011, boy, I could put down a 2-liter in an hour. But Dr. Pepper tastes so good, I couldn't manage it, so I cut it out forever. I've permanently banned myself from Dr. Pepper. Now, that's a little thing. I mean, you may have to ban yourself from any number of things. Some people have to ban themselves from fantasy sports. Richard's told me he banned himself from fantasy football once upon a time. Just throw you under the bus there. Politics, maybe. You may have to ban yourself from politics. I actually used to be really into politics, and I couldn't handle it properly. I got more caught up in the stuff that was going on up there that they were doing than the stuff God was doing. And I was emotionally tied up in it. So I took a long break from that which I'm happy still continues. But that's a tangent. The point being that sometimes we avoid certain topics and questions that we can't handle, or that maybe we're afraid to chase that rabbit down the rabbit hole. And this could be one of those if we just do it based on the world's perspective and the emotional response we have. These questions, though, they're not new, right? How far back does the question of why is there suffering in the world go? All the way, right? Go back to the garden, where things break and you suddenly have an imperfect world, a fallen world of sin and suffering. And that means as you go through Scripture, you're going to find places. Mary's already mentioned Job, right? What are some other places that you think of if we talk about people in Scripture asking God, why are things the way they are? Why am I going through this? Or why is this happening? Okay, the Israelites. Yeah, they're wandering in the wilderness. Yeah, captivity? Absolutely. They're asking, what happened here in captivity?
Well, Christ in the garden was praying to God, asking for this to pass from him.
Yeah.
And while he knew all of it, that doesn't mean that he necessarily was looking forward to going through it. I think that time in the garden helped prepare him to where he was able to go through it and be everything that God wanted.
Yeah.
But still, when you begin something, there's a lot of, I don't know whether you'd say doubt, but there's a lot of questions and wondering, and yet Christ remained true to God's will and got through it.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need to remember that.
Yeah, the life of Jesus. I mean, we saw, if you're a part of the chosen stuff we've been doing, you saw that depicted last week. Jesus in the garden, who, though he's both God and man, he's fully both, he still has to face suffering. He still has to go through it. Other places Jesus went through suffering? Through his life, right?
In the desert.
In different places. He's tempted in the desert. He experienced rejection. He's 33. He experiences some loss, right? Now, he can prevent loss. He raises people from the dead. He heals people. But our assumption is somewhere along the way, he loses his own earthly father. Deals with that grief. Loss is one of those painful ones that are going to come for all of us. It's not really anybody to blame, but still people want to know, why do we have to go through these things? So I pulled some scriptures because that's kind of the point. Waylon, with these topics, actually gives us some material to work from. And so I've got kind of a lesson 1 of 6. I'm going to try not to get too repetitive. We're going to touch on some of the places in Scripture where people are asking about suffering. And so Job was the first place he thought of, the guy who wrote the material, and the first place I thought of, and Mary. So great minds think alike. But Job 23, verse 1, it says, Then Job answered and said, Today also my complaint is bitter. My hand is heavy on account of my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his seat. I would lay my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would know what he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. Would he contend with me in the greatness of his power? No, he would pay attention to me. There an upright man could argue with him, and I would be acquitted forever by my judge. What's Job feeling? Kind of bold, for starters, right?
Said he was bitter.
He's bitter. He's been through it. And what kinds of things does Job go through? What do you remember? In Job chapter 1, we get the introduction.
He lost all of his children.
Yeah. Loses all of his kids,
Lost all of his herds.
all of his stuff, all of his livestock, all of his wealth. And then when that's not enough,
And he found out his wife was not understanding.
yeah,
And he lost his health.
gets the boils first, right? And then she tells him to curse God and die. So you've pretty well lost everything at this point. So Job he's kind of the iconic sufferer, right? Goes through serious hardship.
But he's confident he's got a good case to present.
Yeah.
That he doesn't deserve.
Yeah. We'll come back to Job. Let's skip ahead. Habakkuk. I know this was in all your minds, right? because we go to Habakkuk. We should do a series on Habakkuk probably. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity? Why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law is paralyzed and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. Verse 13, you who are of purer eyes than to see evil and cannot look at wrong, why do you idly look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? What is Habakkuk's complaint? Huh?
As it sounds like nowadays.
Yeah.
Speak up.
Speak up. How are you just, you're not doing anything here, right?
So take action.
Yeah.
See what's going on.
It's a cry out to God to see it and to do something about it. The injustice that he's seeing, the wickedness that is, the wicked are prospering and the others are facing destruction and violence, strife and contention. It's a call to God to act. In Judges, you've got Gideon, Judges chapter 6. Say, please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian. It's Gideon's cry. I thought we were God's people. Where is the Lord? Why is this happening? These questions of trial, they've been part of the walk through life of the faithful from the beginning. This world is, a teacher used to say, this world's not meant to be Disneyland. God didn't design it perfect. That's not the point of being here. You got Solomon and Ecclesiastes, kind of the meaningless stuff. What does man gain by all the toil that he toils under the sun? He says it is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. That's a tough answer for suffering. And then you got the Psalms, which we've been in the Psalms. This is not one we preached on. Psalm chapter 74. You have Asaph. O God, why do you cast us off forever? Why does your anger smoke against the sheep of your pasture? How long, O God, is the foe to scoff? Is the enemy to revile your name forever? Why do you hold back your hand, your right hand? Take it from the fold of your garment and destroy them. What's Asaph want? He wants justice. He wants some payback. This is the retribution theology part of the Psalms. The struggle here with suffering and pain and understanding God's power in the world and God's ability to do something, and yet God does not always do something. It's difficult. It gets difficult when people struggle with loss. It gets difficult. One of the topics coming up is large-scale disasters, I think, is one that's coming. I understand the things that sinful men bring on, right? We kind of get that. We're free will people. We think people have choice, and if somebody chooses to come in here and shoot me while I'm standing here, that can happen. I don't really personally don't put God on the hook for that one. I kind of put that person on the hook for that one, and maybe Satan and whatever he's doing in their life. But what about the natural disasters? Right?
There's a strong verse in the Bible that says, revenge is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord.
Yeah. And wait for that vengeance. And that's kind of where we're going tonight is getting a different perspective. These are all kind of worldly perspective. A lot of this is from a human and their experience and their limited time and ability and wisdom, and we can only see a little piece. We're barely here. Again, this is not where we're meant to stay, right? And so what we'd be better off doing is trying to find a more eternal perspective. But one of the best things I've ever heard on this topic of suffering is God is big enough. Just that phrase. If I said to you, God is big enough, and you want to fill in what comes next or what came before, what's God big enough for? He's big enough for our questions. He's big enough for our doubts. Apparently big enough for the accusations that his own people would toss to him. Where are you, God? He can handle that. He's big enough to carry us. 1 Peter 5, cast all your cares on him. Why? Because he cares for you. Don't be anxious for anything, but in everything with prayer, petition, take your request to God, and what? The peace that transcends all understanding will fill you. God's big enough for the things that we don't understand. That's really kind of where we want to get to, is there is a self-focused, person-focused way to view suffering, but it's always our temporary, mortal, limited view. God sees everything. Jack?
Yeah, it's a little bit self-centered to take perspective. If asking God, why haven't you handled this for me yet?
Yeah.
Because there are forces in the world much bigger than us that are working against him also.
Yeah. And we don't know what place or role we play in it.
See what they're doing,
Yeah.
except whatever the result might be.
Yeah, we're a tiny piece of it.
Yeah. And so, cast our care on him.
Yeah.
Is he going to act immediately? Not necessarily.
No. Well, and that's the beautiful part of the Philippians passage. It doesn't say, go to him with prayer and petition and he'll answer your prayer and give you what you want. He says, the peace of God that transcends all understanding will fill your hearts and minds. And Job is going to God is going to respond to Job. Job will be our guy for the night. Before we do, Marlon?
I think one of the things we have to spend some time thinking about maybe is, how do we define suffering?
Yeah.
Right? Like, suffering can be when something happens that's outside your control, but you're the one affected by it. But when you're the one that did something to cause it,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's suffering anymore.
I mean,
That's
yeah.
its consequence and result of your action.
Suffering, but it's you're responsible for it.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Self-inflicted.
Sometimes our bad choices give us bad things, and we call it suffering.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's a result of what we did.
Yeah.
It's the discipline.
Yeah, and that's,
You did it, you earned it.
I like the discipline, that verse on discipline, which will come up in
Because
future.
we like to say that we earn the things when we did something good.
Yeah.
And we like that learning. But we don't like learning the things when we did something bad.
Yeah.
And then go, man, I'm suffering right now. God, take this away from me. And God looks at us and goes, dude, you did this by yourself.
Yeah. This isn't suffering. This is, it's like what we do with parents. It's natural consequences.
Yeah.
You chose it. But Job did not choose it, right? Job is an upright man, and the details we get in chapter 1, we don't really like. And Job kind of spends 37 chapters going with the friends back and forth on what's happening and calling out to God about what's happening. And what's God's response to Job when God finally speaks up?
He asked him where he was when he was creating everything.
Yeah. Job 38, I skipped that John passage. That was another place where people ask about suffering, is the disciples asking Jesus, why is this man blind? Who sinned, him or his parents? But again, in Job here, if I can find my page. Oh, these are front and back. Hold on. There we go. It says, then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. This is again after Job's been trying to figure out what's going on. Answered him out of the whirlwind and said, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you make it known to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. What does God speak to Job? Yeah, I'm God, you're not. That's a good way to put it. Is God... Oh, we lost it. Oh, there it is. What's God trying to tell him? Is this God being mean to Job? Is he just piling on? Is he kicking him while he's down? What's God trying to communicate?
Basically, he's basically explaining to him, you don't know everything that's going on.
Yeah, you don't know.
And correct me if I'm wrong, God never explains to Job what caused this.
He does not.
So as far as we know, he went to his grave not understanding why it happened. It just
Yeah. Jack's point is God doesn't explain to Job why, as far as we can tell. He just says, you can't know. Joanne?
Job's story has helped many people throughout the world.
Yeah.
And throughout the life of every Christian, because I ask why did Ron get Alzheimer's? He was a good man.
Yeah.
He never drank, he never smoked, but he never drank and he didn't run around on me. He was just a family man.
Yeah.
To me, he was good. And, and I've got other examples in my family, very godly people that suddenly have a terrible illness. And the first thing you want to do is ask why. But as Christians, we should know not to ask that, but I think we do anyway.
Well, it seems like we can, because the people of the Bible do, but
Right.
maybe it doesn't get us
You
anywhere.
might not get the answer.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that's kind of a normal question. It's just that we don't dwell on it because we know God is in control
Yeah.
of whatever the situation is.
Well, that's what we're trying to do, is go from our initial response is going to be us focused and worldly. It just is. I mean, there's emotion involved and there's pain. I think that's just what we're going to default to. Unless you're a mature Christian who's been through a lot of adversity, we're going to have a moment where we're asking why and not understanding. And that can hit our faith. It can cause doubt. It can bring us down. But we're trying to move to the faithful response of God's perspective. And this is different perspective. That's what God's telling Job. We have different perspectives. Chris, and then we'll keep on.
Okay, Joe's down here. He sees all of this. He reasons and rationals out some things, versing his friends, quote friends, and he kind of gets a different perspective and a little bit broader, but it's still nothing compared to what God asked him when God expands his mind far beyond just his little world and his little place.
Yeah.
I think that God expects us to ask why. And when we do, when we turn to him and we read things like this, it may make us mad at first, it may frustrate us, but if we keep looking, and then we read some of Jesus' comments to help us, lean upon me, I cast your burdens on me, I will carry them, I will never leave you or forsake you. Do you believe that?
Yeah.
If you believe that, then you have to realize that there is something else going on and that God is with you and he's going to guide you through it. It's not going to be easy. It may be devastating and you may think you're going to fall apart, but if you stay with him, you won't.
Yeah.
And you will grow exponentially.
Well, and that's the reality we live in. We are here for some purpose. And we're here because an all-powerful, timeless, all-knowing God put us here, which means we're born into this situation where we cannot possibly begin to understand the whys of what he does, the why he chooses this or doesn't choose this, does this, doesn't do this. Why is he silent here and intervenes in a powerful way here? It's just beyond us. And I think that's what God is trying to tell Job. Where were you when I made all this stuff? He's pointing him out. He's reminding Job, this is far, far, far above your pay grade. The things that I do, you can't comprehend why. It's the Isaiah 55. That's a popular verse we do. My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. As far as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. It's true of mortals. And it's like God, Moses saying, now show me your glory, right? And he goes, no, you can't see me, you'll die. Just a little sliver of God's comprehension, I think, would make our brains explode. We have to accept that God is the one who can see all things. And so for faithful Christians, it's a little easier because we know that we trust him. But for the world and for those of us when we come at it from a worldly perspective, that's where that Jeremiah verse comes in handy. The heart is deceitful above all things. And so the point of our first session is, how do you move from worldly perspective and quick emotional reaction to suffering to more of a God's perspective on things? Marlon?
I think when you bring that up, we also have to look at what we set as our expectation.
Yeah.
Because God sets us a different expectation than we set for ourselves. And we have to be careful that we don't put adversity into a box where one size fits all.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what may be considered adversity for me may be a way of life for somebody else. I think sometimes we look at just where we are and what we consider common to just us. But when we look at that same situation where we look at not knowing what we're going to eat tomorrow as adversity, whereas for some people, that's an everyday thing.
Yeah.
And they don't consider that adversity. That's just their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so we have to be careful not to put adversity into that box where that it must be that way for everybody.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm just now realizing we're halfway through. But I'm up next week, so I can continue on. Let's see, where are we here? You know what, I'm going to save the psalm. But if you want to go ahead and read Psalm 73 between now and then, what you're going to see is it's an example of Asaph, the psalmist, kind of moving from complaints about what God is allowing to happen or what he's suffering to trying to put himself at seeing it from God's perspective. And so I'll read a little bit before we close, and just to kind of get us to the point, and then we'll wrap up. Psalm 73 says, "Truly God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet had almost stumbled. My steps had nearly slipped. For I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked, for they have no pangs until death. Their bodies are fat and sleek. They are not in trouble as others are. They are not stricken like the rest of mankind. Therefore pride is their necklace. Violence covers them as a garment. Their eyes swell out through fatness. Their hearts overflow with follies. They scoff and speak with malice. Loftily they threaten oppression. They set their mouths against the heavens. Their tongue struts through the earth. Therefore his people turn back to them and find no fault in them." What's the problem for Asaph so far? It's the wicked prosper. They have no problems. They're doing everything that they want. And they say, "How can God know? Is there knowledge in the Most High?" They even scoff. "Behold, these are the wicked, always at ease. They increase in riches. All in vain have I kept my heart clean and washed my hands in innocence." All in vain. He's feeling like it's pointless to do the good things that he's been doing. "For all the day long I have been stricken and rebuked every morning. If I had said, I will speak thus, I would have betrayed the generation of your children." And then we get a turn in verse 16. "But when I thought how to understand this, it seemed to me a wearisome task, until I went into the sanctuary of God. Then I discerned their end. Truly you set them in slippery places. You make them fall to ruin. How they are destroyed in a moment, swept away utterly by terrors, like a dream when one awakes. O Lord, when you rouse yourself, you despise them as phantoms." What turns for Asaph? What does he do that helps him get from complaint to seeing things in a more faithful, it's God's perspective? It says, "I went to the sanctuary of God, put myself in worship." It's putting yourself in Job 38 and letting God speak to you. Who were you? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? It's admitting our total inability to understand his why, his knowledge, his reason, his plan, but trusting that he has it. He's looking at the eternal time frame, not the temporary time frame. And so that's kind of where I wanted to get to tonight. We barely touched on it, but we'll pick up there next week, and we'll continue this. It's a 6-week series on adversity. Not an easy one. There may be some things that come up that are just difficult, and if you want to visit afterwards or pray about some things, let us know. But it's an important question, one we want to find answers to. But that'll be all for tonight, and we'll pick up there next week.